it's just you and Jashank. I was just here for setup. Cool. So I think we are currently live. We have about 15 people currently on. All right. I'll leave you guys to it. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. So today, we're going to be listening to Jashank talk to us about burnout. As I'm sure you all know, Jashank is a prolific course admin for 1521 and 2041 this year, and he also ran courses such as OS, databases, and more previously. Jashank is also a student like us, so he can definitely talk to us about our current woes of week 10. So Jashank has worked in both the industry and in academia. So he'll share with us his philosophy about about burnout and whatever else we'd like to talk about. I guess this is Jashank's talk. So today we will hear about Jashank's advice to his younger self for deadline and stress, how to help others who are burnt out, and how to manage expectations that you place on yourself and others in both the group and in the individual setting. Take it away, Jashank.
Thank you. I shall dump these slides up here. We were discussing just before we started that I am an old relic and have an old CSESoc logo, which tells you when I last gave a talk, doesn't it? So, it's Wednesday afternoon. It's week 10, and it's the last teaching week, and you're just sort of plodding through it at this point. This year, the last teaching week of this last term of this year that has seemed to go on forever, it's tiring. You're tired. No, you're exhausted. You're dreading studying for exams. The mountain of tasks you have feels insurmountable at this point, let alone all the other things you've got going on. Work, social life, relationships, it's all this huge juggling act. You're just dreading dealing with the world around you. You're burnt out. So a few disclaimers before I begin. All of this is my loud opinions. None of those are those of any of the people who have paid me money at various points. And it's also worth noting that I'm not an expert in this field. The closest I really get to this is the lived experiences I've had, those experiences of the close friends of mine who have been gracious enough to share with me their stories, or for whom I've supported them through these things. And in general, I try to stay abreast of, mental health, well-being things, but my experiences aren't universal. Your experiences may differ. Hopefully, what we talk about today gives you a little bit of perspective. Maybe it can help start a conversation with an actual professional who knows what they're doing and not just some guy on the internet. The other thing, of course, is that we are going to be talking about mental health, in case that wasn't really obvious. I consider this to be a real, quite serious and surprisingly widespread real mental health and well-being problem, which is understandably a topic that might be unpleasant. So if we raise anything that affects you strongly, please do reach out and get help. Services at UNSW as well as beyond, such as Lifeline Beyond Blue, the Kids Helpline, New South Wales Mental Helpline. These mental health crisis lines have really helped many of my friends. They save lives. If we raise things that are unpleasant, please do reach out. So yes, in case you haven't seen or met me before for some reason, not quite sure how, I've had my fingers in many pies at various points. It really does surprise people that I'm still an undergrad. Working really hard to spin my degree out for as long as I damn well can. But one of the main reasons for that is that I've been tutoring in CSE for the last 6 years, and of course admin for most of the last 4. And that list worried me when I was writing it down. It still worries me. I have had my fingers in too many pies. And also, as of this year, I've been a part of Trustworthy Systems at CSESoc Data 61 as a student affiliate, research assistant, systems engineer. Job titles are hard. But more to the point, sometimes I really do feel a little bit like this, a little bit burnt out, a little bit, well, we're going to talk about the truth of cyber. And we're going to begin with a couple of stories, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the warning signs, some of the ways you can mitigate and recover, and hopefully that provides you a little bit of insight into what we're going to do. So, fairly early on in my uni career, I took basically a year off, would you believe? And that's one of the reasons that my degree looks like it's gone on forever. Took a year off to work on a fairly substantial software project, which, thanks to the benefit of hindsight, I now see was a really terrible plan. But I suspect had I not done that, I would not have that hindsight. So if you ever get told, hey, you can work on a cool software project, and what actually winds up happening is you wind up really overcommitted, under-resourced, and on a project that, for varying reasons, is feature creeping from here to the end of time, yeah, that is an unpleasant experience. I was actually working at the time at a real startup, what I consider to be sort of one of those sort of classically successful startups. I believe it has since been bought since I left, and is now part of a large multinational. So really, they've done exactly what a startup should do. But along this whole experience, I learned a lot about sort of practical software engineering, and I don't really mean sort of building software. I mean the building bit, the human interactions, the how to manage that project. I also got my first real experience of burnout during this job. In fact, for those of you who know Sam Pushparatnam, this is actually where I met him for the first time in, 2010, I think? Somewhere back in that ballpark. And so it was a real surprise. And I go, oh, look, Sam, what are you doing here? Anyway, so at the same time, I'd also had some very strange and wonderful personal life issues. And so this seemed like a really good opportunity to do something interesting, do something cool, distract myself from real problems. And along the way, I learned about really engineering problem solving. And one of the most important things I think about engineering problem solving is when there is a problem, it is usually not just one thing that has gone wrong. Complex systems don't fail because of one issue. You look at, say, I happened to see in the last week or so, ABC Australia uploaded their Four Corners episode about the A380 that exploded, or that lost an engine anyway, in 2010 or so. And I was watching through that and I'm thinking, yeah, this is not one thing has gone wrong. This is a perfect storm of things that have gone wrong. This thing has gone wrong in just the right way. This thing has gone wrong in just the right way. Multiple minor failures, multiple cascading failures, things that have got really fine tolerances, things that are running really close to their limits. And it might not, well, hopefully it doesn't surprise you to learn at this point that humans are also complex systems, if we sort of take that engineering notion to its extreme. Humans are... I am very cynical about how fundamentally flawed the human animal is. And, you know, you can go, yeah, bipedalism was a mistake. And if you don't believe that, go look at where the nerves that drive your throat go. The human psyche is very vulnerable, and it's really vulnerable to multiple things going wrong, multiple minor failures, multiple cascading failures. The human psyche is really easy to push to its limits. And at the limits, things go wrong. There are, in some circumstances, really fine tolerances, and it's worse, really variable where those limits are from person to person. And I, ran into my limits in this massive problem and in this massive project, really massive problem. I spent quite a long time really quite burnt out by this project that kept going and going, deadlines slipping, a project that really wasn't managed all that well. I take the blame for at least some of that project going wrong, but it's a big and hairy thing to deal with. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that burning out is a thing that will happen. It won't just sneak up on you, really. Well, that's what I thought at the time. It doesn't really sneak up on you, but you can find, even in jobs that you really enjoy, even doing work that you really enjoy, you can burn out. You can be in a place in your life where you are immensely vulnerable, immensely easy to push to the limits. So that's, I suppose, one interesting story. Here's another interesting story, because I love interesting stories. So after I'd spent sort of in this instance, that had been, a year or two working at this company that I'd previously worked for as sort of a part-time casual, but I spent a year sort of full-time on a project. Once I got out of that, I basically came back to uni, came back, did a lot more coursework, did a lot more teaching, started getting involved in course administration. And by the time we're sort of getting up to here, I taught, in this instance, pretty much continuously since 2017. And when you think of teaching continuously, you think, oh, yeah, you just teach one term and then a next term. And then there's a great big gap in the middle. This is back in the good old days where there was a great big gap in the middle and there were only two of the damn things. Semester 2, 2017, I'd been really heavily involved in COMP1521. I'd been really heavily involved in redeveloping it. And here is, for those of you who love and think that this is a great indication of your progress as an individual, you can see term 2, or semester 2, excuse me, of 2017 right there in glorious, horrifying green. And there were some really late nights. We were staggering a step in front of deadlines some of the way, and a lot of courses do run like that. But a lot of courses now run even more like that. For reference, incidentally, the second half of 2018, that semester 2 of 2018, I did AOS. AOS is a fucking cakewalk compared to running a course. So, 2018, it really is. 2018, I'd been working on a bunch of courses, but they weren't really using Git and GitHub all that much. 2019, I was involved in a bunch of courses again. Many of those weren't really using GitHub and Git, but you can see sort of the end of 2019 there. And that's where we're heading. So I'd been working on, 3-4 courses with my fingers in those pies, doing admin work. I have just seen a remark in chats. Yeah. So 2017 was hard. 2018 was hard, but those were manageable. Those were really, really easy, relatively speaking, years, in my view. And I'd taught pretty much continuously for this entire time. And by continuously, I mean I had worked not just through terms, but through summers. I'd worked across the gap between terms because there's work to be done there. Back in the good old days, there was a teaching period that went on over that Christmas, New Year period. There's work that has to happen between terms in terms of setting up the next offering, finishing up exams, finishing up marking, dealing with subs. There's a lot of work there. And you'd be surprised. I occasionally see emails from students saying, hey, sorry to interrupt you during your holiday. And I go, it's not. There is a lot of work to be done there. And I mean, okay, so GitHub activity graphs are a great metric for how people work on things, I'm sure. And, great way to have a GitHub profile. Absolutely the most employable thing you can have. I will bash the culture that legitimizes this being seen as good later. But first, let's go back to the story. So why was I working hard, and why was I sort of okay with that? Like 2017, 2018, I'd been working pretty hard. A fair part of that I can attribute to imposter syndrome, which I'm sure you're all now aware of and you understand thanks to Hayden's fantastic talk. But the other thing, and probably the most dangerous, wrong clicker. The most dangerous thing, however, that got to me during this time was that I knew what burnout felt like. I'd already burnt out massively on this huge, hairy job. I know what it feels like. It's happened to me before. I know what the warning signs are. It's very, very dangerous to assume that. You can't assume that all burnout feels the same. And that really was what got me here. Somehow, I'm really not sure how, looking back on it, I made it through to the last term of 2019, and that term damn near broke me. So one of the very few concrete things that I can remember about that term, because it's screwed up my sleep, it's screwed up my health. I can barely remember things anymore. But one of the few concrete things I really remember about that term is sitting on the floor in one of the K17 consult rooms up on level 4, and just sort of sitting there on the floor, propped up really against a wall, thinking about all these things I had to do, feeling just so exhausted, absolutely shattered. And this was week 5 or 6 of term. I was absolutely shattered. I'd taken 2 courses, behind on the content of those courses, relatable, struggling managing an offering of a huge first-year course. And I'm just sitting there and I just can't move. I absolutely could not move. I couldn't really do anything. And that was, for me at least, sort of a very nice, great big warning sign that I probably should back off a bit. Went and got help. You should get help, kids. It's super good for you. Got told, yeah, do less, please. So I did less. Dumped a course, cut back, delegated load a bit, and just about struggled through the end of 2019. And we'll pick up the story of 2020 in a moment. But first, just because I want to give a story that isn't just me, I'm going to tell you about a guy named Teff. And for those of you who inhabit Twitter fairly regularly, I love Twitter. I hang out on Twitter quite a lot, probably more than is healthy. To quote the wonderful and infamous White Quark, just as email is a way to give you to-do list items, Twitter is a way to give you intrusive thoughts. So I don't know Teff personally. I greatly respect their work. I definitely consider them to be sort of, I want to say a thought leader, but I'm sure that they would really strongly object. There's a lot of people who have really quite good opinions and stories, and they are sort of thought leaders, really, even though they don't want to be. I would consider Teff to be one of those people. Most notable, I think, for his talk, Programming is Terrible, which he gave at Electromagnetic Field in 2012, I want to say. Great talk, wonderful thing to watch. You should definitely go watch that. This talk is just going to be me going, yeah, here's a huge pile of recommended reading. Go watch this. Peter notes my Twitter is incredibly cool. We're going to get to that. So why is Teff qualified? Why do I consider Teff to be a great person to bring up while we're talking about burnout? Well, this, I think, tells you everything you need to know. Here is a lovely table of, what is that, 18 odd years of adulthood. Teff is mid-late 30s, maybe 40s, I'm not sure. Burnout is hard. Burnout is a thing that happens quite a lot. To quote some of the things that he's written, I honestly cannot be sure about how many times a doctor has said you are no longer fit for work, but it's at least 10. But then again, as you can see, it's now closer to 2 to 3 years between falling apart rather than about 11 months, so that's good at least. Burnout is real, and it has real effects. When you look at sort of the real consequences of burnout, the real sort of lasting effects of burnout, I mean, Teff goes on to say, I'll probably never have a stable or predictable sleep pattern again, or even things like regular appetite. Yeah, that's a thing that happens. Teff tries hard not to tweet about tech, but it's a tech tweet because guess where most of that damage was done? Working in tech is incredibly the culture in tech is one of the things that makes it so harmful and so likely to produce people with burnout. So even though I don't really work in tech, I work sort of tech adjacent. And for this, I don't really have too much in the way of, I have prepared some notes on this, but I have my notes here just say the 20T2 story, and the best I can say is I made the very foolish mistake of thinking that, yes, summer 2019 into 2020, I'm not going to be doing all that much. I don't need to take time off. I'll go do something interesting. I'll go get an internship or a summer placement or something like that. And I did. I got a summer placement with Trustworthy Systems, and it was fantastic. And I absolutely love that research group. And for all of those, for all of you TS people who might be listening, I love you all. You are all fantastic. I thought foolishly that I did not need time to recover. I didn't know that I needed time to recover. And I thought had just recovered from the end of 2019. And so with this frame of mind and thinking everything is excellent, I'm just going to charge forward and admin 2 courses. Yeah, that can't possibly go wrong. And I'm not sure whether there's really much left of Andrew Taylor after that term, other than a charred relic. I know I certainly felt that way. It was an immense amount of work, that term. Not the least because I had also pushed myself, and not just my my mental well-being, my physical well-being, really to its limits. I had, as Peter, I'm sure, can attest to, I really quite badly screwed up my wrist again. And this is one of those things where burning out and the things that burnout relate to are actually physiologically harmful. Let me see if I can find the wonderful intrusive tweet that I'm sure will go nicely with this. Because I am, of course, 100% prepared at all times for everything and anything that can happen. Yeah, when Peter was saying that my Twitter is incredibly cool, yes, it's filled with me shitposting about everything sucking. This was not a pleasant time. This was not a pleasant experience in the slightest. Burnout is not fun. Burnout is not sexy. Burnout is not attractive. Burnout is not something to romanticize. It is not something to legitimize as being a thing that you want to do. It is not a thing that you want to be able to say, yeah, I'm burnt out, it's fine. It is incredibly serious, incredibly fundamentally affecting in the way you look at the world, the way you see the world. You build, and we'll talk a bit about sort of the warning signs in a moment, but this is the peak, I suppose, of the burnout that I've ever experienced. And if you look at the date on that, that's August 2020. That's what, week 6 or 7 of last term. And one of the things that I've discovered, and having spent some time working on myself, one of the things that I have discovered that goes really when I start burning out, when I start hitting sort of the upper limits, is my communication tends to be rather shit. So, and we'll talk a bit about how to sort of address these things. I have some lovely graphs of, oh yeah, I keep data. Data is good. I have in my inbox currently, or across my inboxes currently, it's only come down to 30,000 emails that I need to deal with in some way or another, as opposed to, I think it got as high as 60,000 emails. In my UNSW inbox, I had, I think, 12,000 emails sitting there waiting for me to deal with, and I just couldn't. I had no will to do so. So that's depressing. Let's talk about something slightly less depressing. Let's talk about recovery. Can you recover? Teff would have you say no. Teff would have you know that if you ever actually, you don't really recover from burnout, you just start working again. And that's something that I rather disagree with, I suppose. You can sort of recover, you can take time off, you can process the trauma, you can eat, rebuild, recover. But burnout is, yes, environmental. So it's back to burning out at the next job, hopefully slower. Well, yes. Recovery, I mean, I'm sort of optimistic because actually one of the things that made me laugh the most when I first saw this, and I was telling people that, oh yeah, I'd been asked by CSESoc to come do a talk about burnout, is I'd actually taken this term off because I was burnt out. I intentionally took no, or as little as I damn well could without imploding, teaching work, as little as I damn well could, in fact, no student work. And I've just been working on things that I enjoy doing. Recovery, I think, is possible. One of the things I've been working on lately, I want to say, is reminding me just how much I burnt out and just how much I still have to recover. It is very easy to think that you have burned out, it is easy. You can recover, it is easy. So what made me think that? What are some of these warning signs? To answer Eric's question from, quarter of an hour ago, how do you know that you are burnt out? How do you know that it's not just exhaustion? How do you know it's not just you're tired, you need to sleep, you need to catch up on work? I don't have a particularly good answer to that. And that's really quite annoying because I'd love to come here and say, yes, here is the best ways to do these things. Here is how to know that you are burning out. Here's how to recover. But the truth of the matter is that there is no sort of sunshine and rainbows ending here. There is no one-size-fits-all way of knowing that you are burnt out. There is no, as with many mental health conditions, as with many sort of well-being conditions, there is a wide range of warning signs that you could see in yourself, that others may see in you. but these manifest in so many different ways for so many different people that it's really hard to pin down exactly what it is. But some people spent some time working on this when I was researching this talk. Andrew notes in chat, in my experience, you can tell when you're burned out by looking back on it after it's over. Yeah, I've got a great deal of agreement with that. You know that you burned out because you are now recovering from being burnt out. But there's also some ways that you can sort of know. How can you overcome the overwhelming you feel when you approach new opportunities after you've burnt out? What an excellent question. I'm going to come back to that one because that is such a good question. But some warning signs I see, at least in myself. Hopefully some of you have come across the notion of the fire triangle. Some of you are all closet pyros, I'm sure, and you know that to have combustion, the rule of thumb is you need some sort of fuel, some sort of oxidizer, some sort of energy to get it going. Altogether, it self-sustains. The fuel and the oxidizer can consume. The energy allows it to start and keep going, and the production of that thing keeps the thing going. It becomes this sustaining, self-sustaining thing. And I consider burnout to be sort of analogous. There's these three core tenets. There's actually, in a real diagnostic sense, and again, I'm not a medical professional. I'm reading through medical literature going, interesting. Yes, I know this stuff. Where's that dog who knows how to do chemistry? Think that meme. I don't put pictures of memes up anymore. I just make you remember them. So yeah, the diagnostic sense of burnout, it turns out, builds on these three ideas. And I think the most important in the production of burnout, the most important thing that will lead you to being burnt out is stress. And there's actually there's a fine line here. There's a fine line between a bit of stress that helps focus you. For example, apropos nothing, the thrill of just finishing up writing a talk, which you're delivering in 12 hours. You can guess when I wrote that. And enough stress to cause real problems, because stress does actually cause real problems. Prolonged high stress is incredibly harmful. I have definitely seen, I could not find again, but I have definitely seen in the past real medical literature that backs up this notion of real long-term effects of working in a high-stress environment. Last time I looked at this stuff closely, that was some years ago, of course, there was an increased risk in cardiovascular issues, statistically significant decrease in lifespan. And my recollection is they were surveying cooks in a kitchen. And if you've ever seen sort of a restaurant kitchen, it is an incredibly high stress, high power, high energy environment. And that is a great sort of way to wind up really very stressed very quickly. And people looked at these chefs who were running these kitchens and looking at, yes, their stress levels. There is actually a quantifiable hormone that the human body releases that indicates, yes, there is stress happening here. Cortisol, I think it's called. And they were looking at these levels and going, yeah, these are rather uncomfortably high. And so they looked at what would happen if you had that over a long period of time. And they were talking about, no, heart attacks more likely, stroke more likely. This sort of boils down to similar ideas of, if you've been following over the last few years, the whole sitting at desks versus standing at desks debate. First, we found out that sitting at desks caused heart problems, and we found out that standing at desks caused heart problems. So clearly you just levitate at this point. But there is a real influence that stress plays. I spent some time thinking about how best to give these as analogies to our fire triangle. Stress, I want to say, is our initial energy. It is the thing that gets the whole ball rolling. being in a high stress environment for a long time, being stressed beyond sort of your real limits is exactly where you will wind up looking into burnout. Cynicism is apparently another warning sign, another diagnostic criteria, and I consider this to be just as good. And again, by analogy, I want to say this is sort of the fuel. No, this is the oxidizer. This is the thing that consumes, that is reactive and helps consume the fuel of our perfect fire of burnout. Hopefully I don't have to explain cynicism. If I do, I'll just point at this talk as sort of exemplary. It's sort of this negativity, really having a really short temper towards these things, being really detached from, dissociated from your work, finding no joy in it, even at its extremes, having a degree of dread about your own job. And that sort of overlaps very nicely with the last of the three things, and this is definitely our fuel. Or maybe it's our oxidizer. I don't know. The most immediately evident effects of burnout, and there is, again, medical literature that goes through looking at how depression ties into burnout. The most immediately evident effects of burnout, I find, are those brought on by depression. It is real. People say, oh no, you're just sad. No. No, depression is real. It is crippling. I can attest, as I've already told you, to being paralyzed by it, being unable to move, unable to think, unable to really exist because there is no drive to do so. It is so easy to forget to look after yourself because you don't care anymore. There is no drive to care. My notes here say it's so easy to forget to neglect yourself. No. You wind up actively neglecting yourself. And this can get quite extreme. And for those of you who think, I don't care. There's no real problem here. Everything is perfectly fine about this. I don't mind burning out. I don't mind pushing myself to the limit. Let me put this to you, my dear audience. You're probably all still relatively young. I believe the names I've seen, they're all fairly young people. CSESoc, on average, is a fairly young audience. I know I saw some people who said they were coming to the event who were in slightly older cohort, including some teaching staff. So hello to the people who ensure that I get paid. For those of you who, however, are all still young, it is definitely worthwhile remembering that there is something very weird about your brains. Up until sort of your mid-20s, there's this, from sort of early teens to mid-20s, there's this massive burst of development, growth, maturations. You push your limits. You take risks. When you start to take those risks, something has to give. There is a compromise there. For many young people, there is this sense of invincibility, of immortality. But the flip side is that you don't care about yourselves, your bodies. You don't have any reason to care. So when I throw around, this has an increased risk of serious adverse health outcomes. This has an adverse health outcome. You can just be so readily tempted to just write that off because I don't care. I'll go work at a startup and work 150-hour weeks because it's great. I'm enjoying it. It's fun. I'm taking risks. I'm pushing the limit. The problem is that now is the time to not do that. Now is the time to think about what is important in your well-being, to think about what's important in your physical, mental health and well-being, because the overall effect of you caring about that now is magnified by how long you can continue to do that for. you will almost certainly live longer. There is a measurable decrease in lifespan for people who have, or statistically significant decrease in lifespan for people who live under stress, under depression, under this sort of weird, horrible cynicism. Burnout is physically harmful, mentally harmful. So thinking that burnout is something that you can just throw under the bus and you don't care about, no. The overall effect now is more than it is at any time in your life. I have I've just seen a wonderful comment that just appeared. I'm going to come back to that comment because that's such a great comment. I remember being 5-10 years younger and really not caring all that much about myself. For those of you who've seen me wandering around in real life, you've seen me wandering around. Sometimes I'm limping fairly badly because I have quite literally the entire right side of my body is falling apart. It's great. My wrist is screwed. My ankle's screwed. I'm just falling apart. I didn't care. I didn't think that that was something that I needed to care about. And as I am turning into an aging, decrepit relic, I actually probably should have cared about that slightly more. And again, the temptation is, it's an old person. There's being soapboxing as an old person. We're just going to continue doing the things that we like. No. Care about yourselves, your bodies. Care about your friends. Care about your coworkers. For those among you who have friends who hopefully you're really close to, this year has not been the best year for many people. Yes, some lovely remarks coming about productivity, and I am going to come and talk about that quite a bit in a moment. But first, this year has been hard for a lot of people. I have a lot of friends who live basically by themselves, and for them, the temptation is to distract themselves by working. And they are now closer to, if not actually burnt out as a result of that. But now I'm going to talk about, yes, fantastic. Someone, Linda has mentioned in chat, I take time to catch up with close friends because it's a sanity check, because I value those relationships more than success in academia. That is so true in so many levels. You need to be in touch with your friends, your family. You need to be in touch with those people who you have close relationships with. Lovely remark there from Sam. I'll go off and make these new friends in New South Wales. No virus is going to get in the way of that plan. Yeah. Oh, 2020. Peak 2020 right there. But everyone's talking about productivity. Everyone's talking about burning out. The biggest place that you will see burnout related things is because of incredible risk factors really that show up in workplaces. Some companies even have a culture that really encourages burnout, and that is so incredibly harmful. We have, and I'm going to come back to the remark in chat here about part of the reason I personally led to burnout a lot is because I feel guilty whenever I take breaks. I feel like I should always be just as productive as the other people around me. And John is absolutely on the nail there. But the flip side of that is that culture of being just as productive is the harmful thing here. The productivity race, as Samuel has referred to it there, is the thing here that is harmful. Melancholy has also remarked that first degree 70 plus hour work weeks with working full-time uni. This is in large part because there is this culture, and I think it's actually not just corporate culture. I think it's sort of this whole Western society has this, and I think other Eastern societies have this as well, and it's kind of hard to split the world into West, East. Pretty much everyone around the world at the moment has this drive towards productivity, drive towards burning out indirectly. The biggest thing here, in my view, is the drive of companies to just not respect your well-being. And this is far and away the biggest warning sign. And there's a few facets to this, but we'll talk about those in a moment. But it really boils down, in my view, to how much of your life are you giving away, and is that worth it? Is it worth what they're giving you back? There's you hear about people who will hire for work-life balance. That is absolutely something you really need to look at. Work-life balance is a real thing. It is a thing that you need to prioritize. The thing that gets in the way of that is companies who bring along ideas like crunch culture. And there's a worrying number of organizations who practice this thing. And I've heard it referred to as crunch culture. I've heard it referred to by a few other names. But the long and the short of it is there's a deadline. It's set effectively arbitrarily by marketing usually, or someone who really doesn't understand some sort of engineering effort. And then the engineering team has to put in those 60, 80, 100-hour weeks. They sleep under their desks for a couple of hours. Their meetings are at 2 a.m, and then they just keep going. There's this culture of just turning around the product as fast as you damn well can. And I flipped and flopped on this. Is that good? I want to say that I can see the value in that. I don't think it's good. And worse, there are companies whose whole culture is that, whose whole culture is work under a crunch, work soul-destroying work weeks. I have a link there to a wonderful piece of writing from what I think might be one of the earliest blogs on the web by a guy named Jamie Zawinski, who has rather infamously written about their experiences working at a startup, which at the time was called Mosaic. In 1994. I really recommend you read this. It's a really great, yes, that's an excellent remark there in chat. I'll come back to that in a moment. This startup called Mosaic, and you might not recognize the name Mosaic, but you'll probably recognize the name of the product that they were working on, Netscape Communicator, which had the internal code name Mozilla. It is that same code base that Jamie Zawinski was one of the people who was instrumental to its port to Unix, because that was a thing. And that write-up is truly, well, it depends how you look at it. I consider it truly terrifying because it's burnout. It is literally, here is the guide to burnout. Venture capitalists look at this as, here is how to get a company through an effective result. Here is how to destroy all of your employees in the name of money. Wonderful. I really recommend you read that article there. You'll find it as something like Tales of the Netscape Dorm or something like that. Mosaic renamed to Netscape before they were bought by, I want to say AOL, seeing as we're doing blast from the past moment there. Another alarming practice, and this is something that's much more modern, is your employees are always available and you can always be contacted. You can always be reached. You have your phone. You have your corp phone. We can ping you on Slack. We can ping you on whatever our internal chat tool is. Is it after work hours? No. Is it after the weekend? No excuses. You're expected to respond at all times. And I know there's organizations who lean into this. I would personally, if you're in that boat, suggest leaning out of that organization. I think also the most harmful, Tim in chat has, yep, that is indeed the URL, has a great big warning at the top of it saying you've probably been directed here by a venture capitalist. I'm not a venture capitalist. I'm here to tell you that that is a terrifying story. And if you wind up in that boat, get out. And yeah, it's old, but there are companies who practice that, who think that that is a great way to do it. I really recommend you read that really, really strongly. Unpaid overtime is, yes, absolutely terrible. Don't do that, please, please. Your internship should be paying you. The other thing that organizations, and was it Peter has asked, how do we know that a company cares about well-being? Linda notes, see if they'll let you join a union. Yeah. But I think a much nicer way of spotting a company that is out to get you and out to burn you to the ground is that they have a belief in and they actively seek out rockstar programmers, ninjas, 10 times engineers. These are terrifying phrases in my view. These are, by their very nature, a pipeline to burnout. These are jobs where workload demands, expectations are all set high. The assumption is that you are immensely competent, perhaps superhumanly competent, and you are married to your job. You have no work-life balance. You have no life left. Joining a union is another great way to do that. I know a lot of people who are incredibly in favor of joining unions if you have the option to do so. Yes, I think that is a good idea. Unpaid overtime is a good thing. Sorry, let me try that again. Unpaid overtime is a really bad thing. It's a good thing to spot. Companies that call you a family is code for something unreasonable. Yes, absolutely. Linda is on the money there. Another one that I have seen is companies who, sort of as the flip side, companies who do respect their employees' well-being, who actively say, no, please stop working on weekends. Please don't do that. These companies who cater for their employees, who provide perks. And I know there's probably a few Googlers who are listening to this as well, not just because it is on YouTube, but because they're here for reasons that I don't fully understand. These companies are, in my view, great. This is the sort of model that I would like to see in a company, because there is a respect for employee well-being. Even though there are some questionable things happening in other respects, a company that respects your well-being, a company that respects that you are giving them time and knowledge and effort, that to me is absolutely the most important thing that I want to be looking for in a company. A company that cares about its employees is going to, Atlassian is one that comes to mind. They do a lot of, last I heard, they do a lot of sort of internal team building stuff. They do a lot of internal well-being stuff. Good indicator is that they probably have a bar, but that's becoming a less good indicator because shadier companies are going, oh, we can keep employees by putting in a bar and catering to them and doing all these things. But they've missed the message. They've missed that it is not they have a bar and therefore they have respect for well-being. It is that they respect well-being and therefore they have a bar, they cater. Companies that do work from home well, yes. Let's see. So how do you mitigate? How do you not burn out? How do you be aware of these risks? I mean, even understanding that this is a thing that is real, even understanding that this is a thing that is really quite dangerous is in and of itself a good first step. But there's, in my view, some really sort of quite simple things to do that really help. And they've helped me in recovering, in coping with high workloads in the past. And these are ways that I've used in the past and continue to use to manage sort of stress. Webcam feed at the bar for you to watch from home. Who is it? There's an ISP who have a webcam online of their coffee machine. Trustworthy Systems, before we all had to go and work from home, had a webcam feed of the fish tank, etc. So there's nice things to have there. But yes, things to mitigate. Don't suffer alone. I am immensely grateful to my partner, to my friends who have been so very supportive, even despite my driving myself into the ground, encouraging me to get help. as hopefully I am prodding towards you all, if you are feeling this far to the end of your tether, then yeah, please do get help. Start a conversation with a health professional, go see a GP. They will give you, they're your gateway into getting better help here. Another thing that I find has really helped, because burnout is about balance. Burnout is about sort of, you have exceeded the balance in one direction. I consider the way you sort of counteract that is to understand what you're doing. Reflect on yourself. Reflect on the things you are doing. It is a really important, valuable thing. For those of you who've done Richard courses, whether that's the newer security courses, 641, or for relics like myself, 1917, 1927, 2911, courses where you had to journal, to blog, to reflect. I was thinking about burnout and a thought occurred to me. Because there's some very successful alumni who do this as well, and they've made this reflection, this self-awareness a habit, because it is that self-awareness that is the important thing. There's also, you know, easy ways to just sort of automatically quantify your time. Tech culture tells us it's really easy to take a tool-based approach here. There's no shortage of tools. I've used, over the last 10 or 15 years, I've used a huge constellation of time and task tracking tools and journaling tools. I'm currently using Todoist and Toggle and Rescue Time, and it's really nice that I can look at what I've been doing, how much I can achieve. Journaling at the moment, I'm just using plain text files because I'm ghetto. But you might find that a tool-based approach, just throwing tech at the problem, doesn't solve it, and that is entirely valid. You could just use pen and paper. Experimenting with a variety of things is absolutely how I've wound up in the boat that I currently am, using the tools that I'm currently using. But yes, you must experiment. You must understand what it is that you are going to change before you can change it, because here you now have some data. Here you have all this data you can use. To channel my inner Masha Siglowski for a moment, if there's one thing the tech industry can tell you that it's good at, it is collecting huge amounts of data and then not doing anything useful with that. Quantified data is in particular really harmful in my view, particularly quantified self-data. It is interesting, but it is also quite harmful because you can use that to produce metrics that are really easy to game. Here is a metric, you want to optimize for that metric. Here is a benchmark, you want to optimize for that benchmark. The same problem here. The thing that is most useful about this is the qualified data, the subjective data. That you need to reflect on critically as well. You reflect on your reflection, you keep going ad infinitum. That's where you'll find the warning signs, the things that work, the things that don't work, the things you need to change. Also, I'm going to rant for a moment about 3+. 3+ sucks. Of all of the times that I have burnt out or felt like I'm going to burn out, 3+ has been sort of the one thing in common of late. It is so harmful for students, for staff. I think 3+ is a fundamental mistake and really needs to be reversed for the well-being of staff, of students, of not just the academic staff, but the professional staff, the general staff. Even in this time of wonderful, wonderful uncertainty, I hold more than ever that this is the main reason that I'm burnt out this year, that other people are burnt out this year. Time is not fungible. You can't take a piece of time and substitute it for another. And you can also find out about some wonderful... Wow. Thanks, Slack. See what I was telling you about letting people poke you at all hours. 3+, yeah, I have strong negative feelings about 3+. Time itself, you can't substitute a piece of time for any other piece of time. You can't compress, you can't speed up, because the thing that you are losing is not that time. The time you are losing is the time that you were using to understand, the time that you were using to think about and solve your problems. Also, tech has this crunch culture. Anywhere who wants to crunch, game studios love doing this. Don't do that. Kill that culture, please. It is absolutely the
Live streaming is on.
Oh,
Okay, that's good.
no.
Let me check the actual stream health.
YouTube appears to have woken up again.
oh wow.
Okay, lovely.
Well, that's good, I hope. So, where was my slides?
Yes, we're alive.
Shrey saves the day. Thank you, Shrey.
Yes.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks so much, Ray.
Well, that was perfectly timed, because that was basically all I was going to finish on, ranting a bit about crunch culture and getting mad. So, yes, hopefully I haven't terrified you all too much. Hopefully you've learned something interesting about burnout. For those of you who feel like you need to get help, hopefully you now have some ideas to go forth and get help. But for now, questions. I think Peter had some questions. I saw some questions on chat that I'm sure we can come back to. Yes.
Yeah. One of the questions that was in chat that I do want. How do you overcome the overwhelm you feel when you approach new opportunities after you've burnt out?
Yes, that is a very, very good question. And I've completely forgot that I was going to come back to that. My apologies. How do? I don't have any particularly good advice here, I fear. I don't have any good ideas about how to start, how to recover, or how to pick up after you've recovered. The best things that come to mind are things like be aware, not really be aware, but know what your limits are. And part of this comes down to know and understand what you're doing, know and understand why you're doing things, how you're doing things. This comes back down to the reflecting on your habits and understanding your habits and yourself. There is definitely a once bitten, twice shy sense here. Burnout at its extreme is something that you really don't want to experience again. I have very few, let me turn that off so you can see my ugly mug for a change. I have very few good ideas about how to get those opportunities again. I really do. I really don't have particularly good ideas, I'm afraid. I have very few good ideas. The best I can offer is do what feels right. Do what feels comfortable. Do what feels safe. Understand where your limits are. Reflect on yourself. Understand and know where the limits are, and hope, I guess, that you can spot the burnout and that you can understand that, understand when it is coming for you again. So, long, rambly, windabout answer, unfortunately, as many of these things have.
Another question that I did have as well. So I recently did 1531. I just finished my assignment recently, actually. So in my group, I did find that there was this rat race culture, even though, like, when we don't have that high stakes, right? It's an academic setting. It's not a big deal, right? So what steps would have allowed that type of thing to not happen? Like, it's not just because it's not at this point. It's not the people up above, right? It's intrinsic, right? So,
the biggest thing about that culture, that rat race culture, is how best to express this. Setting boundaries, setting and enforcing boundaries between here is work, here is not work. And this year in particular, knowing boundaries has been hard. And I saw a headline recently that cited a survey by, I think, Atlassian, perhaps, possibly someone else, that Australians, on average, were working more, working longer hours, starting earlier, working later. And I think a lot of that is a result of, how best to express it? A lot of it is the loss of the boundary between home and work. I'm immensely lucky. I have an office space that is separate. I can go to the office, leave the computers there, my big monstrous piles of computers and other miscellaneous random technology stays here, and it tries not to leak out. But understandably, for people for whom you roll out of bed, you then are now at your desk. I don't have any particularly amazing advice other than really set boundaries. Know when you are working. Draw up a calendar, even. Draw up a little timetable thing saying, here is the times you are going to be working, here is when you are not. And try and stick to that. Don't forget that you are not just the product of the work you do. You are not just the job, the project, the group work. You are, in and of yourself, a human. You have human needs. You have an urge to be not working. And trying to get to that is hard, but if you can achieve that, then that's a really good way of sort of separating, providing a nice sort of way of splitting that portion of work from the rest of your life.
makes sense. A question that Andrew Bennett asks: do you have any recommendations for people who can't take time off to recover?
Yeah, that's a hard question. The best that I can offer is, and this I think also follows up with some of the other questions here, where work, there is an environment of everyone else giving 110% all the time, all day, every day. I mean, pushing back against that is a good place to begin, certainly, but getting help. And by help, I mean talking to a medical professional, talking to a person who actually can do the psychology better than me. Someone who's actually, qualified and able to take some time to sit down and help you understand. And a lot of what I have done to recover from that, from the times that I have been burnt out beyond reasonable, has been, to get help. Also looking at ways to be better balanced, better able to try. I'm seeing some excellent remarks going past in chat at the moment. Some excellent get help from a professional. Try and look at how to balance. Try and ease up on the load where you can. There are certainly in UNSW, I would talk to sort of the international. If you're an international student, I would talk to the International Students Unit, whose name is currently eluding me. There's a bunch of UNSW counseling services, a bunch of UNSW student support services that I don't think have been gutted again yet, that I suspect you would almost definitely want to talk to. So that's my advice there.
A question that, so I don't know, in some cultures, going to medical professionals is something that is stigmatized, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. That's a very good point, actually. And going to get help can be seen by some as a sign of weakness. Going to get help can be seen as a sign of being not up to it, not inferior in some way. And to that, I say that is absolutely false in every conceivable way. There are remarks going past here in chat about, is it worth losing marks to gain health? It is so much more important for your long-term well-being to get help, to be able to deal with it, to deal with a problem, to deal with a physical problem. Like, there are people I know who, if they broke their arm, they'd just, reset it and wander off. That, you wear glasses. That is mitigating a problem. That is mitigating a real health problem. Mental health is exactly the same. It is just as important. The things that are... Sorry, I'm being distracted by chat in the middle of thinking, and so thinking is hard. People in chat saying really excellent things. Where was I going with that?
you're up to, it's the same as, wearing glasses.
Yeah. Mental health is no different to physical health, not really even aside from sort of what's affected. I mean, glasses is a terrible example because of how close that is to your damn brain. But there is definitely cultures who consider that sort of the getting help is dangerous or bad, or seen as in some way making you worse, making you a lesser person. And to that I say, okay, cool. The next time you break your leg, you can deal with it. The next time you get horribly, horribly sick, you can deal with it. You can just not get help, because it is, in my view, and I appreciate that this is one of those things that is really, really hard to shift, and the culture around this, that it has shifted so dramatically over the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades of mental health is important, mental health is real, well-being is something to value. That shift happening has been so very, very important, and I absolutely am on board with pushing back against that sort of cultural now. And I appreciate that might be hard, but it is what it is my view on that.
Another question that showed up, regarding boundaries. Do you have any advice? Sorry?
Yes, boundaries. How to set boundaries. How to set boundaries.
I think the important bit is how there's already an entrenched culture there. That's the issue.
Again, this is one of those questions for which I have nothing more than just a long, opinionated ramble in response to. Setting time aside for yourself is oh so important, and drawing that line that says, no, I am going to not work after this time, that is very, very valuable, very important. And anybody, to quote a good friend, Bob Hawke. Anybody who thinks otherwise is a bum. This is, absolutely something that you... The flip side of that question, I suppose, is your well-being worth it? And I personally think that your well-being is worth it. I think that anyone's well-being is worth it. I would choose to respect their decision to draw boundaries, and it depresses me that there are people who would not want to respect that decision, or who do not consider that drawing of boundaries to be a valid and viable part of their lives. So I would certainly suggest you set boundaries, make it clear that you will be doing things at these times. If people make a fuss, then they probably aren't taking care of themselves. They probably don't value their own well-being, let alone yours. So someone has to value your well-being. Please make it be you. And I really appreciate that I'm talking from quite a uncomfortable position of not really respecting my own well-being quite a lot. But anyway, moving on swiftly before I get caught by that idea.
Do you think it's possible to be a teaching academic, casual or otherwise, without getting burnt out?
It was. I don't know if it's possible anymore. It was before 3+ happened. There are a lot of lecturers for whom, a lot of teaching staff for whom drawing boundaries is hard. For teaching job being, that's an excellent question. I'm gonna move that out of my view, because otherwise I'm just going to keep getting distracted by people saying really, really excellent things. There's an expectation of a lot of teaching staff to be available all the time, particularly in CSE, because that's what tech culture has brought. Tech culture has brought everyone is accessible all the time. You can just get an email response at midnight because that's normal. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's normal. I don't think that shrinking the amount of time... What's happened here is we've shrunk the amount of time to do the same work. Something has to give. And that anybody can consider that you can do the same work in less time is just... It absolutely baffles me. It absolutely baffles me that people like... And keep in mind here, I am opining on my own here. I'm not representing UNSW's stance here, but people like... And I remember this when the first rounds of 3+ propaganda were going out, and it is propaganda. It certainly was at the time. The student propaganda was different to the staff propaganda. It was great. People like the head of a major school said, and I'll tell you what school he was in a moment, but said that, it is just time. Time is easy. You're working, say, 10 hours a week on this course currently across 12 weeks. That's, say, 120 hours over the whole teaching period. Okay, you could work 12 hours a week, and you can get that done in 10 weeks. It's just maths, says the head of math stats. And I think that position is absolutely the most fundamentally just incorrect notion. And you can probably have seen the expletives that just went through my head there to back up just how absolutely wrong that idea is. Time is not fungible. Time is not something that you can split and subdivide and swap and move around without any disregard, with no disregard for the consequences. Particularly time in teaching, particularly time in assessing, particularly time in learning. That anybody can consider that you can just take 10 hours and squash it. That you can just take 120 hours and you can just squash it with no loss of anything at all is absolutely barking up the wrong tree. And I honestly will go one-on-one and rumble with that head of school, because that is absolutely a position that when I heard that being bandied around in 2015, 2016, 2017, I was so angry at that position. I am still angry now. There's a whole long rant that I wrote back then on CSESoc on the Facebook group about how everything will suck. And I ran across it the other week and was like, I was right. I was right back in 20, whenever that was, about how bad 3+ is going to be. If anything, it was worse. Okay, enough of me getting angry. How about another question?
Juliana's question: how do you feel with being guilty about being? How do you deal with feeling guilty about being unproductive in your downtime?
This is the question that distracted me because it was just so very, very good. I don't have a good answer to this one either. The best answer I can offer you is, and this is something that I am struggling with actively and that I'm working on actively. Why is it guilt-inducing? Why is that? That is the obvious reason, and the reason that I struggle with. Why does it induce guilt? Is because somehow intrinsically I have tied the notion of productivity to value. My productivity to my value as an employee, my value as a teacher, my value as a student, my productivity, my ability to do things is so tied to that, yeah, I also feel immensely guilty when I go, I'm going to take a break now, even though I have really damn good reasons to want to take a break, and not just, I want to care about my own mental health, my own mental well-being. My damn hand, taking breaks while working so I can rest my hand made me oh so guilty. But thinking about it in terms of what your overall ability to do things is. Don't think about and this is what I mean by the human psyche is a terrible mess. Don't think about the instantaneous. Don't think about you are taking a break now that is vulnerable, that is something to be guilty about now. Think about it instead as you are not spending that time now, and there is a degree of investment into your future. And it's a terrible, terrible hackneyed way to describe it, but being able to take breaks, to consider your health first, is so much more valuable than your overall value to an organization, because you're not all that valuable to an organization if you've driven yourself into the damn ground. If you can't do anything, you are no longer productive at all. And that is what you get for being productive now. And it is something that is hard. And this is something that I have struggled with. And it is something that I actively am working on. I'm actively getting help in. I have no shame in admitting that I do therapy. I do the whole shebang. I spend time working on things like that because I want to better myself, because I want to be able to be balanced, be healthy. It is just as much a part of being a balanced individual as really anything else. Really, I know my answer has gone on for too long when my workstation decides, no. We can turn that screen off now. Okay, another good question, please. Excellent questions, by the way, folks.
What's your opinion on the summer term?
Cursed. Oh, so very, very cursed. That this comes back down to me ranting about 3+, doesn't it? That you can take, UNSW terms used to be 14 weeks long. There used to be something like 14 teaching weeks in a term. And those got compressed down to 12 weeks. And I want to say it was about 2006 or 7. And that formed the semester structure that we sort of know and love for the older among us. I believe there was something more before that. And I, again, would have to rely on some of the longer standing UNSW denizens to be able to answer that one. But after that, you have got these courses that were taught in 14 weeks. Just, we'll shave off a little bit here and there. We'll get them in 12 weeks. And then the first round of summer terms came along, the ones that were 8 weeks long. And those were okay because they were very focused and you were really only working on one thing at a time, and you could really dedicate a lot of energy to that, assuming you weren't wanting to, run down to the beach. I'm sure that's very relatable in CSE because we're all strange shut-ins. Indoor enthusiasts. There's people who would have preferred to spend their summers out and about, and fair play to them. That's good for your well-being. People who want to spend time indoors, okay, so long as you've got a good reason for doing so, so long as that's actively helping you stay sort of balanced and reasonable. But to take these courses that are 14 weeks long, cut to 12, cut to 10, cut to 8, cut to 5, cut to 4, you cannot tell me in any reasonable way that you can take a course that was taught in 14 weeks or 12 weeks and shrink it down that much without students losing anything from that experience. You cannot tell me that in any seriousness. That position has been taken by anybody is absolutely disgusting. I have strong opinions about 3+, and that is summer term is irrelevant. There is no summer. In my view, there is no summer teaching. There should not be any summer teaching taught. The fact that we have to do it is a quirk of the fact that 3+ was not thought through, and that students had to do more weeks than our terms could provide for when they were doing an incoming exchange. And again, I think that's absolutely disgusting. It's absolutely unacceptable. And I could rant about that for hours, but let's not rant about that for hours. Let's have another question, perhaps.
I think one of the ones that I think out during that time. So when you decided to be a tutor, you had the idea of what you're getting into. How did that change as time went on?
I'm not sure I quite understand. Excuse me, I'm not sure I quite understand that. Do you want to repeat that, and I'll rearrange my brain and think about that in a different way?
So, I assume that there were people that were talking about, making the transition to academia and that type of thing. So, you, as a student in the first few years, would have had the concept of what an academic does, how they act, what they do, that type of thing. How's that changed as you transition from thinking about it to actually doing it?
I feel like that's a hard question to answer because the field itself has shifted a lot in the last however many years, particularly with 3+. But the shift towards a lot more online teaching, the shift towards trying to engage students in new and impressive ways to try and build up a better pool of understanding. How has that shifted over time? Hard to say, but I feel like there are more academics who are burnt out or burning out, more academics who are towards or at the end of their tether. I worked with an academic who I'm not going to name, but they know who they are. They were really, really close to burnout themselves. In fact, I think they did burn out because they thought they fell victim to the 2-course fallacy. You can run 2 courses simultaneously. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Not anymore. Not in 3+. You can't do that. There's no time to do that. it's reassuring to see that academics do burn out as well. Academics are humans. In case this is news to you, your teachers are human as well. But yeah, students struggling, teachers struggle more because there is more writing on it as well. It has gotten harder to do. It has gotten harder to teach under 3+. It has gotten harder to teach over the last few years. This year has been exceptional in terms of how challenging it's been, and without the sort of hackneyed empty reassurances and empty wishes. I do really, really praise all of those teaching staff who have had to shift the way they do things, shift the way they work. This year is very interesting. How has my perspective on this shifted? Well, I now have a stronger appreciation for what workload is like for a teacher. So I feel a bit more I'm a bit more forgiving in terms of that was a really short forum answer, lecturer. That was not helpful. This thing is late. This thing is not right. I have a lot more sort of tolerance for that, but it might also be because I'm aging out and mellowing and decaying into the ground. But yeah, it's something that has, in my opinion, has shifted in terms of academics being real people who burn out and have to work through it. Because for an academic, there is really, like, I burnt out during the middle of a term. What do I do? I can't just take the next 4 weeks off and recover and be like, nope, course is over now, bye. You can't do that. It's not possible. The shift that has to happen here is one of culture. There needs to be more of a culture of caring for not just full-time and part-time, but casual staff, because there is a lack of that. The fundamental care about that is being lost, and I am mad. But at some point, the madness just sort of, cynicism gets to it. The madness sort of peters out, and it just becomes cynical, nihilistic, very sort of derisive thought about the fact that, yeah, it's managed terribly.
There was one more question. How do you help somebody you think is burning out but doesn't really believe that they are?
God. I have strong opinions about Are You OK Day. The message is sound. The idea is sound. And for some people, that works. For a lot of people, that could work. The thing you need with that is to be actually listening to the response, actually paying attention to the response instead of just saying, hey, are you okay? No, not okay, but what can I do about it? Encouraging people to get help is far and away the single hardest thing. Yeah, Sam has noted, is very perfunctory at this point. But it is hard to put that question to a person. It is hard for a person to answer that usefully, because the social reflex is just to say, yeah, I'm fine. Dead inside. But I'm fine. Absolutely fine. Everything is absolutely fine. Nothing to see here. Nothing has gone wrong. And yet, there is something wrong. I have no particularly good way to do this for coworkers, but for friends, for really close friends, you can sort of, for close friends, you can, I guess, almost see the change if you know sort of what you're looking for. And part of that is having seen what that looks like yourself, knowing what that looks like to you, knowing what's behind that. But being able to sort of prod a friend and go, no, I think you should get help. You really are not, I don't think you're doing okay. I would encourage you to get help. It is a real problem. It's one of the things that, again, I don't have a good answer to. I don't have even really much in the way of a thought about how to do that for people beyond sort of my really close friends. So the best I can currently do is hope that I can spot that in my friends, hope that my friends can spot that in me. If you know someone sort of not quite as close, perhaps raise that to someone who you might know as a closer friend of theirs. Like, raise that quietly, say, no, I don't think they're doing okay. And there is, of course, the temptation to just be like, oh, they're not doing okay. But no, try and sort of be serious, give a damn, basically. Don't be a dick. Give a damn about another person, about their health, about their well-being. Go with them. Take them to help. I'm only so far that can go, but if you can convince a person that they do need help, that is absolutely the hardest part of it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said about, like, young people think they're invincible, right? You just lived with the fact that you feel you have a shelter around you, right? So when that breaks, right, you just don't think about what are the consequences of this.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the first thing you need to do is just talk to them about this invincibility doesn't exist, right?
I mean, the invincibility problem is a problem that a lot of young people have, and it has effects not just in terms of, doing reckless things like overcommitting and burning out, but, doing reckless, dangerous things like, hell, learning to drive is pretty damn dangerous, but, driving unsafely, pushing yourself to the limit of what your liver can cope with in terms of your alcohol intake. There's lots of things that young people are fundamentally really bad at in terms of risk management and recklessness, and trying to convince someone that no, that is dangerous, that is not a risk you should take, is absolutely what you need to do. And yeah, that's sort of the best I can offer here.
Another question: if they admit they're burning out, how do you help them or say get professional help?
So this is something that I guess is a more general solution, more general point to be made here about, again, don't be a dick. Mental health problems are real. You might have, and I've had this happen to me a few times, you might have someone approach you, whether they be a friend, whether they be, say, a student, whether they be a colleague, saying, no, I'm not okay, I need help. Absolutely the first thing you must do is acknowledge that, respect that. They've done something incredibly brave by admitting that they need help, that there is a problem, that you need to really acknowledge the fact that they are they have seen that problem for some reason. Offering offering to provide, or offering even just to listen to them, offering to talk, to sort of actively sit down and engage and to talk is often a really, really powerful first step. If you feel like that's beyond you, and this is something that happens to me with my staff hat on, when a student approaches me and is like, no, this is a problem. I talk to students about this as well when I teach. But when a student says, no, I'm not okay, under some circumstances you can help, but under a lot of circumstances my hands are really tied and I basically have to pass that off to the higher pay grade or across to people who are more qualified, more capable of actually answering that problem in a real way. Taking them through something like UNSW's counseling service is a really good first step. You can, go with them, act as moral support to them. If that is a position that they're comfortable with taking, if that's a position you're comfortable with taking. The other thing, of course, here is that the flip side of that is don't push yourself to be sort of the be-all, the end-all, the always perfect, always invincible. It is possible that they've come to you at a bad time. They've come to you and you are not in a good place to do that. To which I say, reboot. But no, the thing to do is to acknowledge. You absolutely must acknowledge that they've sought help. Because if you don't, if you sort of brush that off, then that is in and of itself the most harmful thing that you could then do. If you can't help them immediately, offer what assistance you can, reach out yourself. You have the ability to reach out just as more so perhaps than this person. You're somewhat distanced from the thing. Excuse me. Phone's reminding me that I've been talking for too long. You can reach out, you can use your resources. You might be in a better place to make use of your resources. You might have more resources available to you because even though you might not be in a particularly good place, you might be in a better place than they are. If there is, serious imminent risk of harm, there's sort of a expectation that you do something about that. But even if you're not in a position to deliver sort of long-term support, if you're not in a position to provide all of the support you can, you really can make a difference. You can pass the case off onto someone who is better placed, onto a professional, onto someone potentially more mature than you, potentially in a better place than you to handle that. For a lot of the cases that I see as staff, there's really not much I can do. I hand them up. I hand them up the chain to people who are better able to handle that. I've had a few cases where, student at risk. There is a university has a fairly comprehensive, this student is at imminent risk of harm mechanism. I regret that I've had to refer people through that. I regret having referred them, but I regret that it has had to come to that. So, yeah, a bit of a depressing thing to think about, but supporting people is hard. Supporting people is, in fact, so hard that I'm getting a Teams call currently. God damn it, Teams. I said, don't disturb me. I'm disturbed enough as is. I'll get back to that. Yeah, hopefully that was sort of a baby's first mental health first aid introduction. Don't push. Oh yeah, don't push the person to talk. Don't prod them, don't probe them. Don't I don't know. Don't it is not about you. It is not your problem to solve. You can provide support, but it is not your problem to solve, is absolutely the takeaway there. Be supportive, but don't prod, don't probe. Just be supportive. Again, I wish I had a really nice, sort of slick, polished answer for that, but I really don't, unfortunately. So,
It was a great answer, actually. So to wrap up, what's the one thing you want us to remember? And
know the warning signs. Know how to spot the warning signs in yourself. Know that it is that stress, that depression, that cynicism. That is the most sort of that trifecta. You see that trifecta in yourself, you work on it. Reflect on yourself and get help if you need to. There's nothing wrong with getting help. That is sort of the one thing that I can offer. Yeah.
thank you so much. You're incredible.
It's been a pleasure. It's been quite an interesting experience to sort of have to relive and understand this thing that has happened to me, has happened to others. So I do hope that you do take something away from this, my lovely audience, and hopefully I'll catch you again all on campus or virtually elsewhere sometime in the future.
Thank you so much. You're incredibly awesome, Jashank. Yeah. I hope you guys all enjoyed, or at least learned something. This is a very hard topic to talk about. So as Jashank said, remember, if anything you need help
I have a
with,
slide for this. Hang on.
okay.
Assuming I can find said slide.
There are ways to get help. Remember that. These include
We're back up here. There's some. There we go.
these include UNSW counseling, the Lifeline, which is 13.
131114. I'll just do the ad read. If any of the issues
1322
raised affect you, you can reach out to Lifeline 131114, Beyond Blue 1300 224636, the Kids Helpline on 1800 55 1800, or the New South Wales Mental Health Line on 18000 or 11511.
That's right. Thank you guys all for coming. And we'll see you all when we see you. Goodbye.